the next hot job for software engineers would be consulting to solve production failures in vibe-coded apps.
I definitely think this is true. Why do I need to learn skills if the models just keep getting better? And one of the things I like to think about with skills is it's literally a cheat sheet for the agent. Antigravity was able to build this entire extension in Swift based on just the prompt that I gave it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Agent Factory. A few days ago, I had an interesting conversation with a friend where we talked about how engineers and practically everyone are expected to perform 10x these days and even 100x using AI, and how we are all curious about what the future holds for software developers. One of the interesting things we were thinking about is how do we make sure we are producing high-quality code with high output? How much code review do we actually need to do for our agents? And what is the ideal setup for us to actually be successful with our agents? To help us answer some of these questions and to showcase how Google is thinking about the future of vibe coding, we brought today to the show one of Google's top agentic engineers, Rody Davis. Rody has been leading dev tooling at Google since Project IDX, and then Firebase Studio with cloud-hosted AI agent IDEs and experiences. He has also been a major contributor to the launch of Google Antigravity 2.0, where it transitioned from an agentic IDE to an agent-first platform that includes the agent manager, the CLI, the SDK, and the IDE. Rody, it is so great to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Rody, you are one of the top 100 US OSS contributors on GitHub before AI. You can code in 18 languages without AI. You are one of the fastest coders in the world. How are agents helping you scale your impact of the work that you're doing?
Thanks. Yeah, one of the interesting things about this field right now is AI is accelerating everything. Whether it's the learning process or building or just researching and ideating, it's been amazing to see how AI has been able to fit in. For me personally, I've loved using AI to reduce the toil. Like, for example, I can now have it write much richer and fuller test suites than I would have to do by hand, so I can ship things with confidence. I can also use AI to prototype the first, second, and third versions of the app, and then maybe even pivot to a different framework or language after I have a really nice set of things to build on top of. And then finally, everybody has their one thing that they don't like to do. And for me, sometimes that's building marketing sites. And I really love having agents build out a marketing page from my app that I'm working on and take screenshots and put it all together.
Very cool. Building marketing websites. Love it. So as an agentic engineer, can you share your setup with us? How do you actually work in the day-to-day?
Yeah, so one of the cool things about working with tools like Antigravity is we have a lot of things at our disposal, including the agent manager, the IDE, the CLI, and also the SDK. For me, I am a huge proponent of skills. So skills, if you're not familiar with, are a really cool way for you to compress context down for the model. And I like to exploit them to have multiple scripts, having reusable types of assets, putting design systems inside of them, and really using them as triggerable workflows in addition to having things that I want to trigger as a one-off or build out full applications. So for me, skills are an essential part of whatever project I'm working on, or globally, the types of things like, for example, I like to use Obsidian. So I'll have my set of Obsidian skills that I can use when working with my note-taking apps to build my knowledge database, but then I can have Flutter skills or Firebase skills if I'm working on applications that need to involve data syncing.
So do you want to show us some of their skills you're using maybe?
Absolutely. So here I have Antigravity, where I'm going to pull up the customizations tab. So there's some really cool things that we launched at I/O this year, including the Android CLI, which is a super amazing way to work with building Android applications from the command line. I also have been a huge proponent for web first features for a long time. So I have things like the Chrome extensions, the dev tools, and modern web guidance, which if you haven't been using that, you definitely need to. It makes working with modern approach to CSS and other features more accessible. And then, of course, using things like MCP servers are a great way. So I work a lot with Flutter and Dart in various projects, and I always have this one enabled, which allows me to do like hot reloading and dev tooling, which really gives Antigravity a lot of the things it needs to build. And also we can see like kind of the breakdown here. From there, I usually will add skills per project. So when it comes to the various design systems, for example, like ShadCN, you can have a skill dedicated to that so the model can explore how to use that.
I couldn't agree more about what you said with the skills and the MCP. Is like it really changes how you build software when you give the coding agent the right context to work with. It really changes the quality and the output of what you bring. How much do you actually review the code your agent generate?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for me, I feel like I've reviewed more code than I have in the last 6 months than I have in the last couple years. But it's not because I wasn't reviewing code before. In fact, I was writing a lot of code and reading a lot of code, but now I'm just able to produce a lot more. And so for me, I really care about code architecture and how things fit together as pieces, because I like to view coding almost like being a bonsai artist, right? If there's things that are growing, I want to constantly be pruning it so I can work towards something that's simple. And simple doesn't mean that it's easy. It actually takes a lot of skill and energy to make something that's straightforward and to the point and can do it in fewer steps. So for me, I'm viewing architecture as a way to find something that both the agents and I can collaborate on. So I'm kind of moving towards flat architectures where state is separated from UI, which is separated from data. And not only does it help me understand the code, but now I can have the agent write stuff and I can quickly know if it's going off the track. So for example, if it starts putting things in a different folder that I'm not expecting, I know how to steer the agent and say, okay, let's get back on track and make sure we're like following this guidance. And it just has a really clear, repeatable thing that's worked for me across multiple frameworks and languages so far.
Very interesting. So would you say that you are reviewing 100% of the code your agent is actually generating?
So I would say it really depends on what you're doing. So for a marketing site where you're doing a lot of HTML and CSS and not a lot of logic, I would say no, I'm not really caring about the code, but I do care about how it looks visually. So I am going to go in there and say, okay, we have the missing text contrast here. We need to make sure that we're using the right shapes here. So it's very design centric on the type of feedback I'm giving to it. But then if I'm building a backend in Go, I care very deeply about the interfaces, because any small change to an API schema drastically increases the toil of users trying to update and fetch different versions. And you can't just be like, oh, whoops, sorry, that was a common mistake. Let me just revert that, because now you have people depending on various versions. So I care a lot about API contracts and like ABIs. And so once those are reviewed and solidified, as long as the test pass and everything else around it can change, I'm way more okay with a lot of the code being written. But at the same time, I like writing the first example for the agent that it then extends the pattern, because then I'm not guessing about what it's writing. I've already written the first couple versions and it's just going to like copy my pattern and fill it out for the rest of the code base.
Yeah, I love that idea. Like first, giving your own example to give the agent direction on how you want to build it, and then let the agents continue from there. And also, I love the distinction between areas that are important to review and areas that are enough to see they pass the tests. Is an important distinction. And I know you've been building tools for a while. So how has that changed or evolved with Antigravity?
Yeah, so one of the cool things is now I can just approach like the toil that I face on a daily basis and say, how can I make that better? So like, for example, I have this project that I made inside of Finder that where I have this problem where I love to think of things in like time boxes, right? I know what I worked on today and yesterday and the last week and last month and so on. But it's really hard to kind of, when you're working on multiple Git projects and you have multiple things in your file system, it's kind of going all over. So I had Antigravity build something based on tags. So now I can just like click on the various things like this month, last week, this week, today. And Antigravity was able to build this entire extension in Swift based on just the prompt that I gave it. I even recreated it as a Chrome extension too. And so now I can use this editor to build out these workflows for me that not only save me time, but it also reduces this cognitive toil where I can focus more on the design engineering and focus on the time that it takes to review all the things that are being created, and not also have to like try to find out just, where did I last put this thing, or what was I working on last week?
Yeah, I love how Antigravity enables you to get help with all of that cognitive toil, as you mentioned. I'm curious, do you feel like beside, given the initial examples, as you mentioned, do you actually still write code?
Oh yeah, in fact, I really love writing code. I loved code even before there was AI to write it for me. But I think it's because I just have a fascination with like how computers work and like how we can control them. Now, like there's fun projects like looking at really old hardware of like how can I like write something that actually adds new software to that didn't exist, or finding things like I've been really enjoying writing Go, and so like the syntax is really straightforward. And of course, there's times that you just want to like have it write things because you're just trying to like solve a task. But now it's like I get to understand like how do the interfaces work? How does the standard library work? Because if you move through phases of research and prototyping and building, you can then take those things and use them in future projects. So I've always tried to basically research the building blocks that I know I may not know when I'm going to need this, but I want to know it deeply so that at like maybe 2 years down the road, I face a problem like, oh, I know the perfect thing, and I can go reach back for that old project and just have something that I can pull from.
Very cool. I love how passionate you are about really understanding how things work. In one of our previous episodes, we discussed the launch of Gemma 4, and we got a lot of questions from developers curious to see how to use Gemma 4 without the need to make API calls. I understand your personal website actually uses Gemma 4 extensively. Can you show us?
Yeah. So in addition to building things with Gemma 4, like I personally love using LM Studio to work with Gemma 4, like when I'm on an airplane. And it's been a great way to work with agents when it has like a really good knowledge set for what you need to do. And sometimes it's just really trying to autocomplete the thing you're trying to remember. You may know roughly the right syntax, so you can write a version, and Gemma 4 will almost always get it. So I wanted to take that further though. And I know that Antigravity, even the very first version is what I built this with. I wanted to show off something that was built with Gemini, but also was something that I've been trying to build multiple times, and it just kind of kept hitting a wall with like CSS or some edge case I would run into. And that was, I really like the VS Code kind of style syntax of like looking at an entire view for a website. So for example, like all of this is just HTML and CSS, and it's all built with Antigravity, including you can change the themes. This is not actually using VS Code or anything like that, but it allows you to work with a lot of the same syntax. But one of the things that I had is this related post section, and I wanted to use AI to recommend the stuff using a vector database, but I didn't want to have to like spin up a server. So I had Antigravity write the Gemma 4 summaries for each of my posts, and then vectorize each one of those with embedding Gemma. And then at compile time, I was able to basically run a generator that would build the site and then create the related posts for each of the pages before publishing.
That is so cool. So you can basically run this offline without connection to service and get recommendations on relevant articles based on what you're looking at.
That's right. Yeah. And it's completely dynamic based on what you're looking at.
I know you prepared a demo to show us some of the multi-agent parallelism that Antigravity 2.0 can give us. Do you want to show that?
Yeah, let's get started. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new project in the agent manager. So we can go ahead and create quick start, which will generate us a random name. I wanted to show something that will involve subagents and also use the microphone. So I am going to be doing a voice prompt. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Build a multi-page app with Vite. Use subagents for all the parts of the building process. Create a multilingual application that's written in English, Hindi, Spanish, Chinese, and Japanese. We'll use Docker Compose to orchestrate the services. The app will be a note-taking app that lets us write in Markdown and preview it, as well as being able to share notes with a URL. The backend with Go should use SQLite to store the notes and also create a marketing site for it. So if we stop the recording, we can see that one of the nice things about the voice input in Antigravity is it does know about like coding languages and products and things like Gemini is used to, which already makes it better than some of the built-in voice to text kind of systems. I can go ahead and kick off the prompt, and this will basically come up with an implementation plan for us and start our subagents. And you can see it's already been reading the modern web guidance, which definitely install it if you haven't already.
Yeah, while we are looking at that, I know we've seen a lot of updates in Antigravity in I/O this year. How has Antigravity evolved from your perspective, and what do these updates unlock for developers?
Yeah, so one of the cool things that we did at I/O was separate the IDE from the agent manager. And at first, this was disruptive because we had this as like one pre-bundled experience. But one of the interesting things that we have now is separate downloads for Antigravity 2.0, the CLI, the IDE, and even the SDK. And that gives us the ability to install these separately. So for example, if you aren't a developer and you're coming across Antigravity, you probably don't care about the IDE, and in fact might be more confusing if you get dropped into it. And conversely, like if all you care about is a CLI, then we have the Antigravity CLI that you can install, and basically you don't have to worry about having to do anything else. So you can just go into a server over SSH, install it, and that's all you need. But we have a really great way that lets us use this all together. So you can have a place for shared configs and plugins, as well as having kind of a more broad way to work across them. So they have their own chat history. So if I'm in the main 2.0 and I want to do general knowledge work, my IDE chat can have separate history that's like specific to that project or folder I'm working in. But one of the biggest changes that we added is when I go create a regular project, you can see now we have this way to select folders. Now, before, it used to be every workspace that you opened inside of Antigravity was one folder on the file system. So it was really hard to kind of work with like multiple things that didn't match one-to-one. So now I can create a single project that has multiple folders. And so it could be the front end here and the back end here, my Obsidian vault, and maybe even the marketing website. And now I can have a conversations that span those, and then have other projects that could involve those same folders, but in completely different contexts. So for example, you might have a project for working with Figma or Stitch and all your design assets and all the different things it touches. And then you may have a different one for your API server and may connect to databases and other kind of dev tools around like the DBA administration of it. And then likewise, you may have mobile apps. So you might have front-end docs or guidance around like deploying and things like that. So I think it's been really great to kind of have that preference about like how you can compose things as opposed to re-architecting your project to fit Antigravity.
I see. Yeah, no, I love that option to work on multiple folders within a project to work on different parts. I think that unbundling that you mentioned between the agent manager to the IDE is very fascinating to me. Yeah, what do you think that unlocks for developers to have this standalone desktop orchestration app as an agent manager and the separate agentic IDE?
So one of the cool things is like just opening up the door for building things with the SDK, which developers, if they aren't familiar with it, the SDK is our harness that now Antigravity can write code for that's in Python that can do any type of orchestration. If you want to build your own custom workflow that doesn't quite fit into a skill or an MCP server or even the agent manager itself, you can build out anything you want there. As well as now you can do things that are non-coding related. So for example, you could do this before in Antigravity, but we've made a lot of efforts around like trying to improve the permissions to make sure that it like works correctly and that it doesn't do things that you're not expecting. And each project can have its own permissions as opposed to this global level. And also being able to basically work with it as you see fit.
I see. So while we've been talking, I know you've been running multiple things. Can you catch us up on what's happening here with Antigravity?
Yeah, right now it is basically spun a subagent called the DevOps and QA engineer that is literally running through our application and trying to complete the tasks, calling the API, which is a great way for you to use subagents to do different types of hats. You can also have subagents do things that you're used to, like basically just splitting up. You're a front end agent and you're a back end agent, and you can kind of both do your own thing. But the really cool thing about Antigravity is like you can have subagents spin subagents up if you need to, or you can have one basically come up with a plan and it can orchestrate the various types of tasks. And we have things like new slash commands like goal, which is highly recommended if you haven't tried it, where you can say like, I want you to create a goal where we want to get 100% test coverage, and you should continue running the tests and making the changes until you get to 100%. And I've done this so many times and it works really, really great. And then there's just so many other things in here. Like you can like grill me like on like, is this plan useful? Like push back on me, like really try to get to somewhere where you're trying to head. Exactly.
Oh, these are such helpful tips.
Yeah, let's see. I want to see if it also loaded. And there we go. Yeah. The note here looks like it is actually rendering the site correctly, and then the share URLs are working too. That's awesome. So it's all connecting with the backend and stuff like that. So that was great.
Very cool. And the translation also works?
Let's see. Yep, English to Spanish, and it did localize it. Wow. That is awesome.
And what was your input provided besides the prompt?
The only prompt I did was I just said run the app right at the end. I think it was already running in the background, but I just wanted to make sure it spun it up. But the prompt was what I dictated, which is build a multi-page app with Vite, do the subagents for the various parts, and multilingual, Docker Compose, and then gave it instructions about how to use SQLite.
Wow, very impressive. Do you know what skills did the Antigravity use here to build this?
So from what I can tell, it looked like it used the modern web guidance and the Chrome MCP.
Yeah, I feel like the skills are really making the difference and how successful the agent is in actually building something.
Oh, yes. And I think that's an interesting one too, where people are like, well, why do I need to learn skills if the models just keep getting better? And one of the things I like to think about with skills is it's literally a cheat sheet for the agent. So it's the difference between, and like if you're in school at some point, it's the difference between an open book test and you having one page that you could write as many notes on. Like you're going to be so much faster if you spent the time to compress and write it down on a note, because you get to review it and you just can instantly find what you're looking for. But the open book tests sometimes were way slower because you didn't prepare anything and you're constantly trying to find where in the book it is. And almost always you're going to run out of time. So
maybe you can share with us some of the skills you're using in our show notes.
One of the interesting ones that I have that I use in a lot of projects is called like an update docs one. And it is a great way to like think about skills because you'll write context files for every folder on your file system. Also, one of the best things you can do when writing skills is have it write scripts. You want to have the agent run things deterministically in a way that makes it easy to repeat over time. And for that, I just have a simple thing that's like, find all the folders in this project that don't have a context file. And then now the agent knows which one it needs to write. And then also another script, which is find all the folders where the context file is older than all the files modified inside of it. So then just those two simple things, you can have really extensive docs that are always up to date, and you can just invoke it whenever you need to. And we even have things like scheduled tasks and stuff where you can trigger that.
So you have scheduled tasks that make sure all of the context for all of your files is always up to date?
You could, yeah, especially for like Obsidian or other types of tools like that, yeah.
You talked about how Antigravity has evolved, and we now have the agent manager and the CLI and the IDE and the SDK. How should I be thinking about that as a developer? When should I be using each of them in my workflow?
So for me, I've been using all of them in various contexts. So for example, when I'm working on Raspberry Pis and connecting to things at my house, I'm going to be using the CLI because it's so easy to just like install and to get running over an SSH connection. But then I'm using the agent manager to connect to things like any type of API or Obsidian or knowledge work, or even reading files and clipping them and converting them to Markdown from the web page, like building your own RSS reader, basically. And then the IDE I still use a lot for when I'm reviewing the code or I'm wanting to make changes or I'm trying to really understand like what is being created. And then the SDK is that kind of perfect catch-all for like when there's like a very specific workflow that you have in mind that you want to like orchestrate and to call and do things programmatically. Like it is such a great way to have the agent manager write that code to do that.
I see. That's a very helpful guidance. And you mentioned earlier that you use a lot of skills and you also write a lot of skills. So how much of the skills that you have are skills that you have written and how much are skills that you took from some other sources?
So when I was first learning about skills earlier this year, I was really fascinated by turning documentation into skills. So I wrote this with Antigravity, Go CLI, that would parse websites and convert them to Markdown and basically create folders and subfolders for these various pages. And it actually worked really, really great. So at one point, I had like 400 skills installed for various sites that I visited frequently. And I was able to do things where I could ask it about something very specific in the docs and it could like provide really rich responses or even tutorials on like how to do that. So it was a great way to speed up that network latency and also let the models kind of operate more efficiently with up-to-date information, or even if it's not up to date, a specific version of docs that I needed that matched my version, even if it wasn't represented well in the training data. Outside of that, I also been just working on a lot of skills that are useful for the things that I do. So Firebase and Flutter and working with design systems and Go and anything that needs to kind of exist in like a framework level that's wrapping a CLI is like such a great way to use a skill for. And then finally, writing skills for workflows. So just common tasks that I need to do multiple times, where that's like filling out GitHub issues or making sure that I have certain documentation up to date, or basically triggering a certain set of actions to trigger over time. I'll just write a skill that has all those steps and I can provide the dynamic data with it.
So, Rody, I want us to have a little bit of fun. Let's do a rapid fire round. I'll give you a statement and you tell me agree, disagree, or it's complicated. Also, you give me a quick reason why. Are you ready?
Yes.
Let's go. The traditional local IDE is dead. The future of engineering is standalone agent orchestration.
It's complicated. And I think that it's because, like I said earlier, I think it depends on the project and even the types of things that you're working on.
By the end of 2026, a non-technical founder will successfully build and launch a company using only vibe coding.
I think that's true. I think the story remains to be seen for what happens at year 2, 3, 4, and 5, as I think that's where the real tough parts are going to come.
Review-driven development is just a training wheel. Eventually, we will let agents ship straight to production.
No, but I think that what's interesting is I think that we're going to see more dynamic applications. So instead of going to production in the way that a lot of people think of, I think that we're going to have more of these just-in-time applications that are using GenUI and requesting interfaces for us just at that moment in time, but it's personalized for us and not necessarily for the world.
Vibe coding will cause more catastrophic production failures in the next 18 months than the last decade of bad software engineering combined.
I think that's true. I think cybersecurity is still going to be really important, even more than it has in the past.
The next hot job for software engineers would be consulting to solve production failures in vibe-coded apps.
I definitely think this is true, and I'm very interested to see like how this pans out because you're going to have some of these apps get really popular and have a lot of users, and they're going to want to quickly get it really stable.
The biggest bottleneck in AI speed isn't the model's context window, it's poor code base health.
I would definitely have to agree with that. I think you can a context window is great, even with 1 million tokens in that context. But if you have really bad context going into it, you can only do so much. And models can quickly lose track of what they're working on. So having clear, concise documentation and patterns for it to follow only makes it easier to extend that pattern. So one of the first things you can do, get your code base ready for AI by working and iterating in it.
Parallel multi-agent monorepos are complete overkill for 90% of development teams.
I think it's complicated because I think it's on the individual, not the organization. I think some people are going to have really cool, amazing parallel workflows where other people, their focus is velocity. They're going to work on one task as fast as possible. So they may be spinning up agents or multiple things to solve that task, and they'll just be rapidly progressing. So I think some people are just going to use this completely different than we were expecting.
A full circle rainbow in Zimbabwe is more impressive than 100K GitHub stars.
Yeah, I would have to agree.
This is from your time in Africa.
Yeah. Can confirm.
I love it. Yes. I love these takes. Okay, one final question. How does a developer ground themselves in a sea of constantly evolving tools and processes that gets updated by the week?
I think one of the most important things you can do as an engineer is focus on why you were hired and what you bring to the table. You know, you are there to help solve problems and engineer things that didn't exist before and how to make things faster, more efficient. So instead of focusing just on artifacts, think about how can you make scalable impact that changes over time and reduces the amount of toil that everyone's going through. The other thing that's really important is use this moment in time to help agents provide better communication handoff for your colleagues. So for example, if you work with designers a lot, provide richer feedback that involves like more detailed design system notes. And designers can do the same. They can provide really rich prototypes for an engineer to take off to have something better to work with. And you can do that for so many other types of apps, whether you're working with engineering or product management or marketing. It really doesn't matter. You're using AI to help bring a better compressed type of artifact they're going to hand off. And that's going to make you working together so much easier. And one like great way to think about that, I think, is try to make something that you hand off so easy to approve that when you give it to them, it's already ready for them to sign off, right? If you give them something that's like, well, I already did my part, and then now you take it further, they're just going to have to spend just as much time getting the context in their head, trying to rebuild it and take it to the next step.
Oh, I love that take about AI as a catalyst for better collaboration. To close our discussion, how do you envision the future of software engineering?
Yeah, I'm really excited by all the things that are going to be explored, because now we can try something out on a weekend that usually would take us like 6 months. There's so many really interesting things in the space happening right now with that. And so I'm just personally so excited to see the learnings and the boldness to try things that we didn't, because either it wasn't the language that we are familiar with, or it wasn't the framework that we had tried, or even we want to build the framework that we wish always existed.
I see. Well, the boundaries are definitely stretching and stretching. Well, that's a wrap for the Agent Factory. You can find Antigravity 2.0 at antigravity.google and all the demos presented in the show notes. Please share your thoughts and feedback with us in the comments. Also, we just launched the Napkin challenge with Antigravity. Both Rody and myself has taken the challenge, right, Rody?
Yep.
Yeah, and we wanted to invite you, the Agent Factory audience, to take part in it. So it's super easy to join. You just need to provide a handwritten sketch of what you like to build and get Antigravity to build it for you. Of course, we really recommend having the right skills like Rody showcased today. Then you can post about it in social with the hashtag Napkin Challenge. We would love to see the cool things you will build. So share it with us in the comments or in social. And Rody, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been an incredible episode.
Thanks for having me.
See you all in the next episode of the Agent Factory. And now let's shut down the factory for the day. Are you ready, Rody?
I'm ready.
Powering down.